Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick. And greetings to all of you listening from places like Brooklyn, New York, Sturgis, Michigan, Brentwood, Tennessee, Incheon, South Korea, Falkenstein, Germany, and Guildford, Surrey, England. Glad to have you back for another episode, and I hope you're hungry because today you're going to go to lunch with me at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills, California. Now, once you step inside the lobby, go past the front desk, turn right at the harpist, and take the elevator to the roof. Tell the hostess you're there to see Maurice and Tim, and she'll escort you up the staircase and along the swimming pool to our private cabana. Sounds fun, right? Well, it was, and that location was chosen by my guest today for our summit. Tim Lappen is a Beverly Hills attorney, and he handles some very wealthy clients. But it's his other gig that's really interesting because he's the fine autos editor at Haute Living Magazine, which, as you might guess, is a publication devoted to only the finest things in life: travel, fashion, cuisine, timepieces, residential properties, and automobiles. Now, for most of us, this ultra-exclusive universe is just kind of a fun daydream. And if you remember the television show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous with Robin Leach, then you'll know what I'm talking about. It's always fun to see inside that world. And for Tim, it means he gets to drive amazing cars from Aston Martin, Bentley, Ferrari, McLaren, Rolls-Royce, and on down the line. Only the most exclusive cars make it into the magazine, so not a bad gig. Tim and I got together on a sunny day and we discussed the cars he writes about, as well as his personal cars and what drives him as an enthusiast. One thing I really like about Tim is that he's not too sentimental about any of this stuff, which I can definitely be from time to time. He loves technology, and he's an early adopter, and he gets excited about the next big thing. His daily driver right now is a Hummer EV, and let me tell you, that thing is really impressive. He took me for a ride after lunch. We had a great time recording this one, and you can catch more of Tim's writing on his website, which is lifeinthefastlane.org. So check that out. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave me 5 stars and a quick review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you happen to listen. And tell your friends about Horsepower Heritage. And finally, if you want to support the show with a donation, go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and become a patron. And big thanks to those of you who've already done that. All right, grab some dark sunglasses and pour yourself a cool drink. It's my conversation with Tim Lappen from the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. And that's coming up right after this. This episode of Horsepower Heritage is sponsored by Model Citizen Diecast. No matter what's in your garage, you can fit all your automotive heroes on a shelf. And they've got you covered, whether it's 1/43rd scale, 1/18th scale, or even the ginormous 1/8 scale masterpieces from the Amalgam Collection. Go to ModelCitizenDiecast.com and get 10% off when you use the promo code HERITAGE at checkout. Limitations apply. From race cars to street cars and everything in between, it's Model Citizen Diecast, because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Well, hi, everybody. Today I'm speaking to you from the roof of the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. I'm having a very posh lunch with a great guy. He's an attorney, but he's also a car guy through and through, and he writes car columns for Haute Living Magazine. Tim Lappen. Hey, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Thanks. Yeah, we really picked a good day, didn't we?
We did.
This is definitely a Chamber of Commerce day here. A little bit chilly, very sunny. There'll be a couple of bathing beauties coming by from the Chamber of Commerce later today.
Well, Tim, I should have really asked you how you wanted to be billed. Was I accurate in that?
I didn't know you were going to bill me for this. So you can't say that kind of word to an attorney without saying, well, yes, that was very accurate, especially particularly like the great guy. I don't hear that one very much, but the lawyer part and the journalist part I hear a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you and I have kind of been, corresponding about cars for some time.
Yeah.
through the magic of social media.
Really.
But you managed to get your hands on some very nice high-end cars on a regular basis, and then you have a column where you share your thoughts on the cars.
I do.
How long have you been doing that?
Well, I guess in a way I've been doing it since I learned to drive. And as you probably heard, OPM is the most powerful drug in Hollywood because it's other people's money.
Right.
So early on I learned OPC.
Other people's cars.
Other people's cars. So in high school, following the lead of my brother, John, who was 4 years older and went to a different school, I started the Car of the Week column at my high school newspaper. And going to school in Pacific Palisades, we were very near a lot of dealers in Santa Monica. And amazingly, looking back on it, I would go to the dealer, tell them that I was a high school journalist, show them my high school press pass, and they would give me a car. I don't mean go with me. I mean, I would take the car and leave. And this was in 64 and 65, so I'm talking about Buick GS, Pontiac GTO, Mustang GTs. It was crazy that they gave me those cars. I mean, if I were their lawyer today, I would say don't even let them in the door, but that's the way it was.
Those are more trusting times.
Trusting / stupid / simple / whatever.
Right.
Maybe the litigation wasn't as prevalent. But I would borrow the car for an hour. A friend of mine would come with me with a camera. We'd take pictures. The next week I'd bring back a picture, an article to show them, yes, there really was a business purpose to this. And then flashing forward, as an attorney, I would speak at conferences, and I thought this is a good place to show a car, and I'd go to local dealers and say, can I borrow your Aston Martin, leave it in front of the Beverly Hilton during the conference, pay the valets if it's a multiple day event to leave it in front, wash it maybe at night, and then the car would get visibility. It'd be there so I could give people a ride if they wanted to check it out, and I'd get a nice car for the day or a couple of days.
Very smart.
So it was really fun. It was really fun, and no bad stories to tell, no tickets, no arrests, but it was fun to do that. And then in 2012, the publishers of Haute Living Magazine, Seth Semiloff and Kamal Hotendani, were in LA. They're based in New York and Miami, and they said, you know, your clients as a lawyer working for family offices are very similar to our readers. We ought to be doing things together, like events or something. And so as we talked further, and I told them of my interest in the cars, and they said, well, that sounds really interesting. Would you like to be the fine autos editor for LA and New York? And I thought, you know, the story is you're supposed to be in the mailroom for 6 years, and then you work your way up. But start as the fine autos editor for New York and LA sounded pretty good to me, so it didn't take me long to say yes. And then a month or two later, they gave me San Francisco and Miami and Moscow at one point. We were doing articles in Russian, and it was great. I just assumed it would just be a nice way to then go into a dealer and say, I've got another card to show you, what can I borrow? About 2-3 months in, I get an invitation from Lamborghini. We'd like to fly your business class to Miami, have you stay at the W Hotel on South Beach, and see the Aventador launch. You'll be driving on the track at Homestead Raceway, and then we'll give you one for the afternoon to drive around Miami. There'll be evenings with dinners and visits and the like, and we'll fly you home on the third day. And I was totally shocked. I really had no idea what I'd signed up for. Usually, when you think of people signing up for things, they don't know all the facts. It turns out way worse than they thought. This was awesome.
Well, as I said, we're here at the Peninsula, and the place reeks of class. Yeah. And this is the world you inhabit. Jet setting, expensive lunches, the good life, right? But it wasn't always so. You were just a kid from LA, right?
Well, yes, I don't want to make it sound like I was a sharecropper's son or anything.
Right.
Yes. No, I had a very good life in the Palisades. Kids drove their cars to school. Most kids at Palisades High, many kids at Palisades High had a car. Some of them, there was a kid in my class had a Tucker.
Really?
Now, that was not the car it is today. But another kid had a new Porsche, what was it, a 356. So there were different vehicles that people had. Most of the guys would have cars from the 50s. I had a 57 Pontiac Chieftain I was very proud of. So it wasn't, and you say I inhabit, I would say I'm 1 degree of separation from the world you just described.
Fair
yes,
enough.
I do the nice lunches I can say yes to. I don't winter in Gstaad, I don't summer in the Seychelles, but my clients tend to be wealthy, they're very wealthy people. And so cars are a really great connection, much like if you're a wine connoisseur, an art connoisseur, and a sailor, a tennis player, a golfer, you like hanging with other people who have those interests. So for me to have this natural interest of mine since childhood, to be able to, I wouldn't say monetize it in a sense, but to be able to put it into kind of a business form has been really great.
Cars do break down class barriers. That's for certain. Talk about growing up in LA in the car culture. It's always fascinating to me because it's really always been there. But we have these different eras that are so distinct.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, being born in the late 40s, I know I look much younger, but being born in the late 40s, that was the time where the GIs were coming home from the war. They'd played with airplanes and tanks and jeeps, and they knew a lot. I don't mean to make it sound like it was all fun, but the point is they had experience with machinery and sports cars. So these kinds of vehicles started to show up in Los Angeles. In fact, I'm told that they were selling the 356 Porsches. I don't know the prices at that time, but they're probably in the low 2000s, maybe even high 1800s or something. And the story was that I think it was Auto Zipper couldn't sell the higher end of those, so he asked for the cheapest possible car to be made, and they made the Speedster, which was very bare bones, which is ironic if that's the true story, because that's one of the most valuable of the Porsche 356s today, those stripped down cars. But back to your point about what was going on at that time, there was a guy up the street who had 2 sons, and those sons got to play with this amazing machinery. So one of them rode an Ariel Square 4. It was a very unusual motorcycle. Could hear it from a mile away, very different. But what was most intriguing to me was one of them drove a Type 35B Bugatti.
Really?
And as a little kid, I know it sounds really ridiculous. I'm getting goosebumps telling this story because my parents had a fairly long driveway, so I couldn't see the street. But if I'd be out playing and I heard the sound from a block or 2 away, I'd run out to the street to see it go by. And, you know, this cockpit that looked like a fighter jet, kind of cockpit, very missile-shaped, and coming by with the noises that came with it. And I still remember the smells of those cars. I didn't know at the time, but in that era, they didn't have good neoprene. They didn't have any neoprene. They didn't have good rubber seals. A lot of them had leather seals. And so they had to drip oil on them to keep them supple, and the oil would burn. So then they used castor bean oil, and it was very pungent. So these cars would go by. The Bugatti would go by, and that smell would be intoxicating to me. That was the smell of excitement, of success, of rampant speed. And I'd see it come around the corner, because my parents' house was on a corner, but there's no stop sign. It'd come up and downshifting, take off up the street, and I thought, one day I want to be that guy.
I know you must know Terry Kargas from the Peterson
Sure,
Museum.
Of course.
And Terry told a very similar story when he was a kid watching the Torrey Pines road races. And I remember him saying the sweet smell of the bean oil in the air,
Yeah.
very evocative.
Right, it's just like, I love the smell of blank in the morning, right? So
Right.
It depends on which movie you're watching, but yes. It was like that children's book where I think it's a swan that's born and sees a duck and thinks it's a duck. Are you my mommy? I didn't exactly think the Bugatti was my mommy, but I thought, is that my destiny? There's something about that mystical car. It was sort of my horsepower unicorn, so to speak.
Right. It gave you an appreciation of those early cars as well.
Amazing. And then I know my dad had a friend that one time came over with a 300 SL Gullwing. I thought that was the most amazing car I'd ever seen. Another friend drove an XK140 Jaguar. And his secretary's husband was a CHP officer who came over on his cop bike and gave me a ride once. That's probably the statute of limitations has run out on that thing, so he's safe in that me telling. But it was, because I had such an interest, as Jay Leno would say, anything that rolls, explodes, or make noise. I had such an interest in any machine like that I was very fortunate to get to indulge that interest. The environment, there was, I think it was called Goodies. There was a speed shop that was around then. There were a lot of drive-in restaurants that were still open right on the corner of Westwood and Wilshire. There was a drive-in restaurant. And so hopping up the car was the thing to do. When I turned 13 or 14, I got a J.C. Whitney catalog, and I went through it and checked off all the chrome parts I was going to get for my car. I didn't have a car, but, getting ready for it. So
Right.
I was definitely the kind of guy who would camp out at the DMV when I was 15 and a half, just because I wanted to be sure that last 6 months I was ready.
That's wonderful. What was your first car?
My dad had a friend who sold a 57 Plymouth convertible, which is hardly a hot rod, and it was hundreds of dollars. I don't remember how much it was, and so that was my first car for a short time. But my brother had already started school at Berkeley and had this 57 Pontiac, and he wanted a convertible for the Bay Area, and the Pontiac was that was the car to me. It had Tijuana upholstery, tuck and roll. It had 3 2-barrel carburetors. And I thought, it doesn't get any better than that.
So you guys traded.
Swapped. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my car until got T-boned by another student at my school one morning and bent the frame and dropped the trans, and that was sort of the end of that car.
What year was the Chieftain?
Chieftain was a 57 two-door.
So that's really the start of the performance years for Pontiac.
It was.
Yeah.
And flashing forward, I was on Bring a Trailer about 3 years ago, and I thought, I'm going to look up my high school car, whatever. It's I know it's such a ridiculous story. When guys get older and they have the money and some time, they want to buy the car they could have had or should have had. And so I type in 57 Pontiac, and the Bonneville convertible shows up, and my brother had just given me the directory of what these cars are worth. And that's a rare car. I didn't know that, but they only made 660 of them. And I saw that it had been on the auction the year before and had a no sale. And it was below that number. And I thought, who knows what's going to happen? But I waited till the end and jumped over the bidder before me by a few thousand and ended up getting it. So I now have a 57 Pontiac Bonneville convertible to relive my youth. It's a little different car. It's not quite a hot rod, but it's it's a Boulevardier.
It's a beautiful car. And if I remember correctly, the 57 Bonneville only came in 2 color schemes.
That's right.
It was either a white with a garnet red or a white with a metallic blue.
I believe you're right. There was the white's called Safari White, and interestingly enough, I went on Amazon, God bless them, typed in Safari White touch-up paint, and it said 57 Bonneville.
Wow.
I go, what? I guess that was the only year they used it. Had a perfect match. And they had these spears on the side that had different colors. There might have been a color, I think there were a couple black cars, like 5 of them, maybe blue cars, and they had different spears. But mine is the one that's typical, which is a white car with red interior.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's got more smiles per mile. And it's so funny, depending on the age of the person who's about to tell me something when I'm driving, I can tell what they're going to say. It's either, I used to have one of those, or my dad used to have one of those, or a kid, my grandpa had one of those. And frequently you find out it was a Chevy or an Olds or a Buick. But those cars look so similar that if you weren't into cars, they would see, especially on the Bonneville, it's got rockets mounted on the fenders. Oh, that's the Rocket 88, right? No, that was an Oldsmobile, but it's okay.
Yeah, there were a lot of rocket and jet motifs on the trim and the hood ornaments in those years.
Yeah.
Lots of different makes had them.
Yeah.
Tim, do you find driving so many brand new cars that you are disappointed when you drive an old car these days?
That's a terrific question. As someone said, you should never meet your hero, and maybe you should never go back to see the idol of your youth, whether it's a person or a machine. I think my expectations are still a little warped to what I expect these cars to do. I had some work done on the Bonneville, and I gave the guy a ride, and he says, "What are you doing? You can't punch this car." And I of course, in the 57, when I had in the 60s, I would punch it all the time. It's fun to burn rubber when you only have the right rear wheel to worry about. Right? But yes, it's not disappointing, but it is a reality check. I tell people I drive the Bonneville with the headlights on because I want to be sure no one's in front of me when I go to put the brakes on. Because these cars don't handle very well, although interestingly Coker makes a tire that looks like the original, but it's a radial, so it helps. They don't stop very well, and I even had a problem with my Bonneville one day where it stopped about 10 feet farther than it should have, meaning
really?
I ran into the back of another car.
Oh.
Nobody got hurt, and it was just a fender bender, but it was still daunting because the pedal hit the floor and there was nothing to do. The parking brake didn't slow us down on that.
That's a sickening feeling.
It is a sickening, and it's in the movies it's low motion. In reality, it was slow motion. I'm going 10 by the time I hit this car, and I'm thinking, do I open the door and drag my feet? At what point do I Fred Flintstone this vehicle to see if I can get it to stop?
I had a similar experience just the other day in my 31 Model A, which has mechanical brakes.
Yeah.
They're four-wheel brakes, but they are mechanical, and you really have to be careful with them. I've got to get in there and check them and make sure that there's nothing wrong.
And same with the Pontiac. The brakes are fine if they're working.
Right.
And those are the days of the single master cylinder, marginal power braking assistance, a drum, of course, and so the shoes are marginal. Materials now, in some respects, don't work as well. They don't have the same material in it because they can't put asbestos, for example, in the brake pads, so the brake shoes. So it does take a readjustment, but the same is true getting out of a Mercedes 4x4 squared, G-Wagon and getting into a Lotus. You better recalibrate because you're in a very, very different environment.
Mm-hmm. Driving so many new cars as you do they begin to sort of all feel the same? Or do you still find that there's a distinctive character between cars?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I frequently refer to cars as having personality because carsonality sounds weird, but for example, and I'm not dogmatic, so I don't believe, for example, that BMW is a great car. It's better than this, or Mercedes is the best car because I think there's room for all of them because they're very different vehicles. So my wife, for example, wants the quietest, plushest ride. She doesn't care about going around corners fast or accelerating quickly. And so I think I care about everything, including looks. And so I like the look of the car. I like the way it sounds. If it's non-electric, if it's not electric, then the sound is kind of gone. I do find that cars have a distinct personality. Interestingly, for example, McLarens to me feel similar to each other, but not like any other car. And universally, they feel faster than their specs to me. It's a more thrilling, and in a good way, drive than other cars frequently because even though it doesn't have tremendous horsepower, it's not like 900 or 1,000 horsepower, the feeling of speed is transmitted to the driver as such. I like the seating positions, but on the other hand, some of the McLarens, for me, they're made for someone whose body may be younger and narrower than mine, to put it nicely. Some of the cars are impossible for me to get in and out of, and as I've gotten older, I tend to have the cars delivered at night so I can practice in the dark when no one's watching, so I can actually get out without having to roll on the ground.
So many great sports cars now. McLaren, Porsche, Aston Martin, Lotus, Ferrari, Lamborghini. Any favorites?
Favorites for sort of different reasons. Aston is one of the cars you mentioned. I've owned 3 of those now. 3.5 actually. I split one with my son. I love them. I think the style of the Aston is the sort of the gentleman's touring car. Is it fast as the others? Well, it's not the fastest. Is it handle faster? Not really, but it handles well. It does a lot of things well. But when I come out in the garage, and this is probably true of any car, but I don't have that many in the garage, But in my garage, when I came out and see the Aston, my heart would like skip a beat. Like, that is a beautiful car. But see, I just had the Ferrari F90 Spider. That is a beautiful car. You know, so all of them are really beautiful cars. I'm most familiar with Aston, and but any one of the cars you've mentioned would be fine by me to have. The challenge for me is if I buy a car, it's going to have to be one that I can afford. This is always a good start. And second, one that my wife likes riding in, because I don't drive by myself all that much. Maybe a commute, but is that really what I want to do in a car that's 3 inches off the ground, especially when my face is at the exhaust level of everybody on the freeway? So like I love Lamborghinis. I was on the Giro one year where I got to drive. It was 4 days. We were in Park City for 2 and then drove over to Jackson Hole and drove there. And I was in an Huracan and in a Aventador. Unbelievable cars. Unbelievable. I love the sound. To me, the sound is almost as important as the performance. And that's been the challenge about electrics. The performance on electrics is astronomical. The dollars per acceleration are so low relative to what you need to do to get a car to go that fast.
Are EVs exciting to you?
I've had 6 EVs so far. I had the first Mini Cooper electric with friends at BMW, so there were only a few hundred of those made.
Right.
Ended up keeping it for 3 years. I drove it every day, had 60-mile range, took forever to charge. It wasn't really fast, but it was fun. It was a different kind of vehicle. Then I had the Active E, which was the first 1 Series that they made. Wasn't purpose-built because they built a 1 Series gas as well, but it was a homegrown electric, which was a great car. And I loved having a trunk for a change that the Mini didn't. Then I had an i3, which never took off. They're getting a little more popular now. I had 2 of those in a row. And then I switched over to Audi, and I've had an e-tron SUV, which we still have. My wife calls it the Zen Mobile. Super quiet. It's the version that has dual pane glass. Extremely comfortable car. And then I have the RS e-tron GT, which is an amazing handling car. I bought it after going on a drive for a press drive in the rain on Mulholland, and I thought, this car's like it's on rails. It was amazing. And then just a few months ago, I got the Hummer EV SUV. And I got to say, GM totally knocked it out of the park. They did such a good job on that vehicle as to all the things it does. It's got, I would say, literally 1,000 bells and whistles and adjustments you can do, and the rear wheels will go turn at this angle or that angle or the other angle. It's amazing.
Hi guys, Maurice Merrick here. April is Parkinson's Awareness Month, and my friends at Drive Toward a Cure have planned a very special event to support Parkinson's research and patient care. An evening of music and motion will be held at the National Automobile Museum in Reno, Nevada on Thursday, April 18th. The event will feature prominent cars owned by performing artists, as well as cars driven by legendary racers who were challenged by Parkinson's disease. Legends like Phil Hill and his C-Type Jaguar. Special guests at an evening of music and motion include singer, actress, and producer Vanessa Williams, Rashida Ali, daughter of heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali, and Shelby Hall, granddaughter of the legendary Baja racer Rod Hall. It promises to be an evening to remember, with cars, music, and more. The event is just around the corner, April 18th, so get your tickets or make a contribution at drivetowardacure.org. Just click the link in the show notes. That's drivetowardacure.org, supporting Parkinson's research and patient care.
Tim, have you seen the Rivian R3X?
Only in pictures.
I love it.
Yeah, it's got the press looks amazing on that vehicle. I was, to be honest, never a fan of the SUV. I'm sorry, the pickup and the SUV, because I just don't like the lights in the front.
I'm not a fan either.
Yeah.
they're not masculine enough for me. I think even if they just turned them 90 degrees, they'd look a lot better.
I know, it's weird. So, look, I think every car maker says, I want to make sure it's distinctive.
Right.
But distinctive doesn't necessarily mean good looking. I also was disappointed because I went down to see Rivian at their place on Venice Boulevard in Venice that they had like set up. I was really impressed by all the features they showed me. I could never get a car to borrow so I could do an article on it. And I don't know to this day why that was. But,
well, you'll have to try to get your hands on that R3X because, first of all, as I say, I love the look of the car. It looks like a Lada.
Yeah.
You know, which is odd to be attracted to this former Eastern Bloc,
right.
You know, like economy car, boxy. It's a boxy little thing, but the surfacing on the R3X is really amazing.
I say from the pictures it looks terrific, and the stats on it seem amazing.
Yeah.
But you know, when you've got electric, you know, the sky's kind of the limit. You've got a certain amount, like on the Hummer, 3,000 pounds is batteries.
Right.
So who can afford to carry 3,000 pounds with them unless the vehicle's 9,000 pounds?
Yeah.
And then you've got, so there's this trade-off between weight and range and charging speeds and performance, and you could dial any electric car to go 0 to 60 in 1.5 seconds, and that'd be the end of the charge. You know, you could use it, so it would be a tremendous accelerator but not have any range. Right, you can gear it down. It's like having a drag car.
I'll have another. Thank you.
Right,
just
so you have
tonic on the rocks.
There we go. Yeah, be sure to mention that because.
Yeah, right. No, it's too early for cocktails.
Yeah, so I plan to reach out to Rivian. I was disappointed that I didn't know about it. I saw friends in the videos who were there for the event, but I think it's going to be a big seller because it looks really good, and I understand they got some more funding, so that'll be good for them.
Yeah. I'm cheering for EV manufacturers. I haven't spoken a lot about EVs on the show, and probably no one really cares about my opinion. I want to see EVs succeed. I think they're incredible. You know, technological development is what the automotive business is all about, and it's given us incredible machines. I just wish that the market forces were running the show. I feel like there's too much government involvement in compelling the manufacture of EVs. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how you feel about it, but I want the market to decide.
You know, it's a really interesting topic, and part of it is, if you think about decision making, most people make decisions based upon either an avoidance of pain or an access to pleasure. I mean, if you really look at it as a binary thing. And so when gasoline is $8 or $9 a gallon, there's a very strong pain point. And people are standing in line, or when there's rationing going on, it's a real challenge. So, but it's not that expensive. I mean, it's still expensive, but it's not that expensive today. Like when I was a kid, gas was $0.25 a gallon. You couldn't say, buy an EV and save money.
Right.
What money? It didn't cost me anything to do this. And things were so spooled up. You know, electric cars are phenomenally simple by comparison, but the engineering costs and getting to the point of building one is a whole other matter. Because Minis proved they didn't know anything about battery temperature management. So these cars, they put some in Buffalo, New York. I think they might have had some in Death Valley. And they're finding that in extreme cold and extreme heat, they're getting like 30 miles on a charge. Because electrons apparently leave quickly and return slowly when charging in those extreme temperatures. So they didn't know that, and I don't think Tesla knew that on their first Roadster. But then I think Tesla was the first to get into liquid management of the temperature, and they have it kind of figured out now with cooling tubes running through the batteries, battery management. You know, people think of electric cars and think, well, jumper cables. No. When you plug a car in, you're communicating with a lot of computers and sensors in the car that are looking for not only state of charge, but other problems and also temperatures. So there's a lot technologically going on. So, but if I remember seeing a beautiful story about people wanting to convert a Camaro from the 60s to an electric car. And they said the first thing we're going to do is take out what we don't need and put it here in a pile. So what they have over in the pile is a radiator, there's a motor, there's a transmission, there's a muffler, there's a catalytic converter, there's a gas tank. It was this giant pile. So what are you left with? Frame, wheels, brakes, seats. There's not a whole lot left. And so when you think about it, the challenge is that you have 100 and some years of a system that's been built up to have mechanics, to have tire stores, to have all these accoutrements and
infrastructure.
Yeah. So you still need roads, but you don't need a lot of the other stuff. But one of the infrastructure things that's not around is the refueling or charging stations. First, they tend to be quirky. A lot of them are out of service. I probably use, in the last 6 years I've had electric cars, I've used a public charger 4 times. It's just not important. Because once cars got over a 100-mile range, I was rarely driving more than 100 miles. I come home and plug it in. And the utilities would allow you to set it so it comes on at 11 at night, at the lowest time to buy electricity, and it would be ready in the morning. Never went to a gas station, never had to look for a gas station, never had to get to a gas station and worry that it was going to be closed or full of people yet or whatever. Gas stations are a thing of the past in terms of my electric car life.
Yeah. Well, listen, as good as electric cars are and continue to, and as much as they continue to improve, you just can't shake that love for the internal combustion engine.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a certain nostalgia. There's certainly, almost my mental definition of car is one that smells like petrochemicals and sounds like, and so there's the sort of the basic premise of the vehicle is missing when there's no smell or sound.
Right.
And I like the analogous sound that makes a noise as the car goes faster, as you're accelerating, the engine whines higher. So even if you were a passenger who had blindfolded, you would have a sense of feeling just from the sound, the sense of what kind of speed you were receiving. And there's also, I say frequently that I grew up in an analog world. And so to me, perfecting the heel and toe double clutch was an art. And a paddle shift that automatically rev matches isn't the same thing. I learned how to use oversteer and understeer, and having electronic traction control isn't the same thing. And to me, to a certain extent, it's almost like cheating, which I know is ridiculous, because these cars electronically can drive way better than I can. But there's still something that's like, I got the rear end out and had to go appropriately sideways in the corner, brought it back. It's like there's this mastery of the machine, and it feels a little more analogous to racing a horse than the electric cars do, because of the nannies on the electric cars. Even the Hummer I mentioned, when you go through a corner, the inside wheels are slowed and the outside wheels are speeded up to help torque vector this vehicle to corner. This is a Hummer, but that's just how these vehicles work. The rear wheels can steer in tandem or opposite to help you manipulate this car into much smaller places. I haven't been to an intersection yet that I couldn't easily make a U-turn in one try.
Right.
No 3-point turns.
Speaking of which, the Cybertruck steering is getting people in trouble because I think it's like a half a turn.
That's what I heard.
Lock to lock.
I've heard that.
Or half a turn to lock.
Yeah.
So, did you see the Cybertruck that hit the wall in front of the Beverly Hills Hotel?
Yeah, I know. Someone asked people to put to caption this photo, and I have to say I'm not a fan of the look of the Cybertruck. Sorry, Elon, but I think you're doing fine without me. But I said, so my thing was the car was so embarrassed to be seen in Beverly Hills, it tried to jump in the bushes.
I think that was Johnny Lieberman on Instagram who put that up.
Yeah, that was Johnny Lieberman, and it was he that I responded to. We talk about an iconoclast in the world of automotive. Really delightful person to read, and But you know, I criticize from afar when it comes to the Cybertruck, because I haven't driven one, but I did park next to one with a Hummer, and I'm happy with what I bought. I'll leave it at that.
Well, now you were talking about the joys of a manual transmission and shifting, and you mentioned paddle shifting. I never have liked paddle shifting, never really felt comfortable doing it. Maybe I just need more stick time, as it were. But I do love a manual transmission. I never will get that out of my system. Having said that, you know, my daily is an automatic, but I find myself going into manual mode a lot, especially for engine braking. I just, you know, that's just how I drive it.
Yeah.
And knock wood, I haven't broken the gearbox yet, so. But these modern transmissions can shift so fast.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Well, some people don't realize that some of these paddle shifts are automatic transmissions and some are actual manual transmissions, where there's a clutch being depressed or disengaged and gears changing, and then the clutch comes out.
Yeah. But the multiple clutch transmissions, incredible.
Yeah, when your shifts are in milliseconds.
Yep.
You know, the old school guys will say, "Oh, I could shift faster." No, you can't. You really can't. I mean, look at Formula One cars; they've been that way for years. So, you know, there's no lever on the outside running this thing. So it's,
right.
You know, I think it depends upon what you grow up with to a certain extent. I remember my dad was very excited. He said when they came out with the automatic transmission in the 40s, because you didn't have to shift anymore.
Right.
And when I got my first car, I wanted a stick. I just really wanted a stick. And then I ended up getting a stick eventually, but the Pontiac and the Plymouth were both automatics.
Yeah.
So, you know, why do you want a stick? I don't know. It's part of the gestalt of driving. It's sort of the and then to the next. In some of the movies, they have augmented sound when they shift the cars, so it sounds sort of a bank vault closing.
Right.
There's a real solid sound to it.
Well, it really also depends on, you know, depending on what era of car you're talking about, it really depends on how good the automatic transmission was, because so many of them would kind of hunt for the right gear.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'd be lugging 1 second, and then, or if they didn't kick down well.
Good point.
You know, Mercedes always had very like rough shifting gearboxes, the automatics. And I say rough, there was a very positive feel to the engagement when they shifted, but they were bulletproof. You knew what the transmission was going to do, versus certain, let's say GM or Ford automatic transmissions, where they're kind of slushy and they don't impart any particular feel, especially on the downshift.
And it was especially annoying in the early days of when they were looking at fuel economy, where the car in automatic would start in second and be in fourth on the other side of the intersection, and it's just sort of lug along. And you know, from a performance person's perspective, that seems almost sacrilege to have a car running 800 RPM or 1,000 RPM on the street like that. I remember the M5, the first V10, had that SMG gearbox, which I thought was just awful. If you didn't shift it manually, it just didn't know what to do.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Tim, that you've had the opportunity to travel a bit to write about cars. Any particularly great trips that come to mind?
Thanks for bringing that up. I'm trying to think when that was, maybe 5 years, 6 years ago. Bugatti had called and said, "Can you join us in," I think it was Idaho, "we're going to close this road for the day. There's a road that we're allowed to go, top speed runs." And unfortunately, being a lawyer and a journalist, sometimes the lawyer part says, things I can't move. And that was very hard to say no to. So then, not long after, they asked if I could meet them at Thermal to drive the car on the track. And I thought, oh no, couldn't believe it. So then another month or so goes by, and they said, "Okay, we got one you probably will not say no to. We've got the Grand Sport Vitesse, the Veyron Grand Sport Vitesse model coming out, and we'd like you to join us in France." I go, I'm done. I'm there.
We.
Yeah. I felt like saying, like the guy who says to his wife, hold the baby for another month. I got to be somewhere. So I decided I was going on that one. So I flew to south of France, and interestingly, they picked me up in the Phaeton because Volkswagen Group is a big owner of Bugatti at the time, and Volkswagen Phaeton, which didn't do particularly well in America, it was a beautiful car. So they picked me up and we went to Provence. Okay. I flew into Marseille.
I can smell the lavender now.
Yeah, it's so beautiful there. And we stayed at a gorgeous resort that was minutes from Circuit Paul Ricard. And the next day we go out, and I'm driving this car, the one that had won the hot top speed record, driven by a Japanese driver from the Grand Prix circuit. I think it was 258.6 or some huge number. We drove around Provence. I had one of the factory drivers with me, and it was just an awesome experience because, for one, the roads are beautiful. For another, sometimes there's a little bit of traffic, but it's like a hay wagon or something. How much time does it take to pass a hay wagon? Less than a second, right? So you can pass anytime. And then after lunch, the afternoon was at Circuit Paul Ricard, where I got to drive this car at 202 miles an hour on the track. And that was like the experience of a lifetime. But then to cap it off, we flew up to northern France and went to the factory at drawing a blank from them, right on the border of northern France, and I saw how they built these cars, and then went to the city museum, the big French museum. Must have 40 Bugattis there, including a Royale.
The French National Museum, yeah. That's in Alsace-Lorraine, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I forget
Molsheim.
Molsheim, that's the name of the town.
Yeah.
So I went to the Bugatti Chateau and
Right.
saw the factory. It's just as a budding engineer to see that it's like this is how it's done right.
Right.
Everything about that place was just perfection. It'd be like, if you had to have surgery, that'd be the best place. The second best place would be a surgery center, but it was just spotless.
Yeah, it would probably be easy to forget you're working.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how these guys do it, but yeah, it was. I mean, to me, the ultimate country for travel, which I love France.
Yeah.
And an ultimate host. Bugatti was so good to me, and the ultimate car on these ultimate roads, and then going on the track. It couldn't have been better.
Incidentally, have you had professional driving instruction over the years?
Only in conjunction with these cars. So,
okay.
So it wasn't like a whole full-on course. I did take a course with my son. One of my sons, I think he turned 18, or maybe it was 16. We went up to the
Skip Barber?
Skip Barber.
Yeah.
Right, when it was at
Sears Point.
Sears Point.
Yeah.
And drove BMW M3s, I think they were. But yes, we've done that. But otherwise, like on the Bugatti trip, I had 2 laps at Circuit Paul Ricard with Mr. Raphael, the driver, factory driver. And then years later, when I drove the Chiron, I went with Andy Wallace, the factory driver.
Was that Bugatti trip the first time you hit 200?
Yeah, only time.
Only time.
Yeah, I've been close in other vehicles, but not that close.
Right.
160 actually in a Bentley. On U.S. what's it called? A USAA Raceway. I forget what it's called now, and the one that was in Ontario.
Oh,
Auto
right.
Club Speedway.
Right, Auto Club Speedway. Right. Wow. Did it feel like 200 in the Bugatti?
No, and I say, well, part of it you have a wide track.
Right.
We're on the straightaway in the backstretch. Secondly, you're in a car that's been meticulously maintained, and every tire has been groomed with nail trimmers. It's
right.
just in perfect shape. They had gone through to check the tire temperatures and the pressures before going out. But I felt so comfortable. It was almost the way you feel in an airplane going 600 or 700.
I can imagine.
You don't get the same feeling of speed. The fastest speed to me was always when I rode my Triumph Bonneville motorcycle, because it vibrated so much, and you sit up so high, if you're getting wind in your face, and you're going 100 or 110 on a Triumph Bonneville, you think, wow, this is the fastest thing in the world. It's not that fast.
Right.
And the first time I got on a Ninja, I'm going like 125 or 130, and I could hear the motorcycle saying, "I thought you wanted to go fast." What's wrong with you?
They do. Those bikes are scary because in order to have fun, you really have to seriously break the law.
Yeah.
At least on a public road. Any track time on motorcycles?
No, I haven't. I thought about it, but
Yeah.
I didn't. And a few years ago, I gave up motorcycling. I figured I'd cheated death for quite a while.
Sure.
I'd had back surgery, and it didn't inhibit my riding. And I actually recovered very quickly. But I thought about, I had back surgery after maybe 4 months of radiology and poking and prodding and knowing exactly what we're going to do, and getting the right people lined up in the right hospital. And you think, you get on the 405 and get hit by a garbage truck, they're going to take you to the hospital that's nearest, and you're going to get what you get, and good luck. And I don't mean that it won't be good medical work, but it's just, the fact is, the survivability is very different from a surgery that's planned like that. And my wife and I have got 5 kids together and 12 grandchildren, and I thought, I think it's probably time. And a good friend said something which I thought was brilliant. Don't get rid of your motorcycles. I said, what do you mean? Don't get rid of them, replace them. So that's why I got an Aston Martin.
Very good.
So yeah, it took a lot of the sting away.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm going to let that sounds like a saw.
It's hard to know. Yeah, being outside like this, being in the cabaña at the peninsula, it's not a very it's easy duty, but still.
Right. It's a
construction.
It's a rotary saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing construction.
Yeah, they're building a high rise.
Even at the peninsula, we can hear garbage trucks and rotary saws and probably cutting some rebar.
That'd be my guess, because they're building a high rise right over there.
Yep. So earlier we mentioned the publication you write for. You're the auto editor for Haute Living, right? Magazine business is tough these days, but they've managed to carve out a niche.
Right.
Tell me all about the magazine.
One of the things that attracted me to the magazine, once they told me about what they were doing, very high production values. So it's a quality, and a larger magazine. It's not the largest physically, but a larger size, thick paper, quality photos. Almost every cover is someone internationally known. So they really do their homework and find out what their readers want. It's good company to be in terms of the car articles. It's actually one of the challenges for me. You mentioned Rivian earlier. It's a magazine. It's not a car magazine, right? It's a lifestyle magazine. And my beat, so to speak, is exotics and hypercar lifestyle stories. There are plenty of places that'll tell you torque and bore and stroke and weight and power ratios and things like that. That wasn't of interest to me, even though I like the stats, because it's been done so much already. I wanted to say, what's it like to drive this car? And what's it sound like? What's it feel like? And so I like to, one of the highest compliments to me is when someone says, I really liked your article, and I don't really like cars. So, it's not that I'm trying to avoid the car connection, that's a big part of it, but I'm not trying to write for the car aficionado per se. I'm writing for people who are just interested in my style and who want to hear my take on these vehicles. So when you look at the magazine, there will be a lot of fashion, accessories, jewelry, watches. They have a sister publication, Haute Time, with timepieces. They have another publication, Haute Residence, for high-end real estate. I've done car articles for those, but most of them go into the Haute Living magazine.
Right.
And
incidentally, are you a watch guy?
I'm not. I think you have to, I wouldn't say pick your vices. Luckily, I'm not a watch guy.
Yeah, it can get very pricey.
Well, you see some of these watches, like the recent potentate who got married with a extremely expensive watch on his wrist. People are funny this way. They'll say to me, "What was that car like? What's the Ferrari, the SF90?" Well, as it sits, it's about $659,000. $659,000. And then I'll notice they're wearing a watch, right? So I'll say, that's a nice watch. What is it? Oh, this is a Patek. You know, what would you pay for it? Well, they're worth $125. I got mine for $100,000. I said, why'd you do that? I have an Apple Watch that keeps much better time. Why would you buy that?
My watch is connected to a satellite. Is yours?
Yeah, I know. My watch beeps and boops at me. It can play games. It can make a phone call.
Yep.
Your watch just sits there and tells time with a stupid machine.
How boring is that?
Yeah, right. I'm being facetious, but it's like, what makes a good wine? What makes a good painting? I just had this conversation the other day. How do you come up, what's a $659,000 Ferrari to make? And I said, they probably asked Van Gogh that. Like, well, I'm looking at your painting and I see that you've got a frame that you could buy at Aaron Brothers for probably $9.95, and then you got some paint and brushes and whatever. I mean, how do you figure the value? Well, obviously it's not an intrinsic value. It's a kind of the package deal as to what's the provenance worth on this thing.
This is all so subjective and so individual.
Well, look at purses, look at shoes. But, that's the human condition. Not every human's afflicted with that, but there is a desire to have something that's the nicest, whatever, as a pride. I mean, one of the things I think Starbucks did really smartly was to say, you could buy the same coffee that billionaires like, right? They don't say it that way. Well, you think about it, for $6, used to be for a nickel or a dime you get a cup of coffee, but for $6 you could have the same latte that the Sultan of Brunei has when he's in town, right, or whatever. Anyhow, back to the magazine.
Yes.
I like the way it's put together, and that the challenge is only that, and when you mentioned Rivian, the cars that are sub 100,000 in particular aren't exotic enough to really be in that magazine. There's nothing wrong with them. They're great. In fact, some of them are wonderful, wonderful vehicles. But they're looking for something. It's a visual medium. They want the reader to turn the page and go, whoa. And so, for example, if I could get a BMW 7 Series for $80,000, or I could get the top of the line 7 Series for $250,000. If they look kind of the same, that wouldn't be a good magazine article.
Right.
Porsche 911, or is it the RS2 or RS3 or whatever? If it looks kind of like all the others, it's not going to be a good visual pop. But they like things that people can buy. They don't want me to cover historic vehicles or one-offs. So it's just the mandate of the magazine to stay with high-end luxury and exotic cars. And those are the companies also that advertise in the magazine, because that is their market as well.
Right.
And they know who their market is.
Exclusive lifestyle. Yeah.
It is, and it's fun because a lot of these magazines are in the rooms of hotels like the Peninsula and on private charter jets and things like that. So I'll get a call from a client in some country who's just seen my magazine in the limo that's taken him from one place to another. It's fun because it's been distributed that way to get around to publication. I believe the last numbers were about 100,000 per issue, a lot more eyeballs online. I mentioned earlier, I wrote an article on Audi, the R8. When was that? Well, I think when it first came out, and it did it for the Russian edition. And it was the easiest proofreading I ever had to do, because I had to look for the word Audi. I found that, found Tim, and found Lappen, and that was it. I couldn't read anything else in there. That magazine has since folded, so they don't have a Russian edition. But they have many cities where they have a dedicated website for that city, because a lot of what they put in there are events that are coming up, and Haute Living does a lot of events in conjunction, Haute Time and Haute Residence as well, with others. So they'll have an event where they'll be toasting the person who's the cover person, and then they may have a liquor or wine or champagne company as a host, and maybe a watch company or cigar company as a host. So they put together nice events as well.
Tim, let's talk about style. Because you've been writing so long, I imagine when you got the magazine job, it was old hat by that point, right? But has your style changed
I don't think so. Several people have said, I can hear your voice when I read. And that's really my goal. My goal isn't to be highfalutin, and my goal is to be entertaining and informative. And that's my personality to a certain extent. I look at, I'm coming up on 50 years as a lawyer. I've spent a lot of time learning stuff. I love learning about almost anything. I find it fascinating. But I also find it useful because I'm an advisor, consigliere perhaps, but an advisor. And the more I know, the more useful I can be to the people I give advice to, and whoever those people are, whether, obviously clients, but family or friends or others. And I like being that person because it helps me amortize all the time I spent learning these things that I like to think I know at least something about most things.
That's a great way to look at it, amortizing the time you spent to learn it.
Thank you.
I like that. I also like your dry sense of humor, by the way.
Thanks.
What's coming up for you? What's your next car assignment?
I'm not sure in what order. I've been hoping for the Puro Sangue from Ferrari. And Ferrari is another one of my imprints from childhood. You know, of course, that was the car. Growing up, Ferrari, Jaguar, Maserati, those were all sort of the racing cars from the Le Mans era. And my good friend Don had a Skylectric slot car set.
Sure. That
we played on endlessly, put pennies in the tail end to make them heavier and go around corners better and whatever. But Ferrari. So I'm looking forward to the Puro Sangue. The Lamborghinis, got some coming down the road. I think there may be a Storado coming soon, sort of the quote off-road Huracan. I just had a DB12 Aston Martin, which I loved. I've had two DB11s and a Vantage, and I just think the DB12 is just a wonderful, wonderful car. There's the new Maserati MC 20, which I think there's a little more like a race edition.
Right.
So there's different vehicles that come out, and if it's interesting and fast and moderately to very expensive, those are all good cars for me. Bentleys, I'm a big fan of Bentley. I've never had a Bentley I didn't like. My next article is on the Bentley Mulsanne Flying Spur. When the Flying Spurs first came out, I was really more of a fan of the GT by looks. Then I drove a Flying Spur at 160 on the track, and I thought, and we're having a conversation as quiet as this. I said that this is amazing that this can do that. And so driving the Mulsanne, which is really the top of the line Flying Spur, was a gorgeous car. And everything you touch or look at is just so beautifully done. Reminding me of Pagani, that everything you see is crafted by a jeweler. Just amazing.
Tim, do you need a traveling assistant? I'm available. Well, listen, this has been fun, and what do you say we eat some lunch?
That sounds like a good plan.
All right. Folks, you can catch up with Tim Lappen on Instagram at Tim Lappen, Lappen. Lifeinthefastlane.org is your website.
Correct.
And, of course, at hauteliving.com, where people can read your car articles. That's HAUTE living.com. Tim Lappen, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. Join me back here on Wednesday, April 10th for more of the people and stories behind the machines. So until then, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.